for the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India...
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the 81 All Out podcast. I am Siddhartha Vaidyanathan at Sidvi on Twitter. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Clayton Murzello, the group sports editor of Midday in Mumbai. Clayton is a good friend of mine, and he has also been on this podcast once before, where he provided us with a terrific history of club cricket in Mumbai and various aspects of cricket in Mumbai. So vast is Clayton's knowledge of cricket, especially cricket in Mumbai, that we ended up talking about cricket in the Maidans and the other union and other clubs for most of that podcast. But I wanted to bring him on again because I had to talk to him about an aspect of cricket journalism that I missed out on last time. And that is the stories behind the stories. That's how I like to call this podcast. And what did I mean by that? It's, we all see what appears in the newspaper or on the website. But there's so much more that goes into the making of some of those stories. We hardly hear about how the journalists got the story or what challenges the journalist went through and what hurdles they had to overcome to get the story. Often these hurdles can be quite demanding, and the stories, one often hunts for stories for many, many months, sometimes many years before one finds them. So I thought someone like Clayton would be great to talk about these things because he has vast experience in this field. He has worked for 3 decades in this field, and he also works. He has also worked throughout his career for a tabloid and not for a daily newspaper, which means that he has constantly had to look for angles and different perspectives because he can't. They don't want stories that a typical mainstream paper would have. So, Clayton, let me start by asking you about that, about the advantages and disadvantages of working for a tabloid and the need to look out for creative stories, the need to have something different from the competition. And, it's not like you can just write a match report and be done with it for the day. You're always on the lookout, right? So tell us a bit about that.
Thank you, Sid. It was a very glowing introduction. I'm sure I don't deserve all this, but thank you for having me on this show. And I'm happy to answer whatever questions you throw at me. And thank you, Ashoka, too.
Hey, man. Hey, Clayton. Nice to meet you.
Yes, I'm terribly sorry to Ashoka. I didn't tell people that you were here, but I think by now everyone knows that Ashoka is the 81 All Out regular at ABVan on Twitter. So yes, welcome Ashoka and apologies.
No problem, man. I'm just here to hear out all the stories by people. So it's a fortunate place to be.
Okay. So yes, Clayton.
So basically, I've been working for Midday for the last 25 years. As you said, there are different challenges working for a tabloid newspaper. I won't say afternoon newspaper because we are no more an afternoon newspaper. I believe there's only one afternoon newspaper left in the world, and that's the Evening Standard. But I may be wrong on that count. So as you've seen, you've been someone who's been with me on tour, and I'm not saying that the other journalists don't have pressures, but we have different pressures of getting a different slant to a story, doing a lot of features, which the normal reporter may not have time because he's always on the ball during the game. And I've loved that opportunity because it's quite unique. I mean, you can leave the press box and go off and do a story, which is a freedom which I really appreciated from my organization. And that stays right till today.
Yeah, and talking about tours that you mentioned, there is a certain kind of personality, at least journalistic personality, that does very well on tours, and there are certain others who tend to get a bit lost because tell us about that when you're on a tour for a month and a half, 2 months, sometimes longer. how do you have to approach it? How much of preparation do you do before a tour? How do you think about stories? I mean, is it? I know that I've seen from personal experience that you are somebody who plans 3-4 days in advance, sometimes even weeks in advance. Can you tell our listeners a bit about that? How that happens?
Yeah, it's a very interesting process because you get into preparation for a tour. I'm not saying like no other. I'm sure other journalists also prepare for a tour, but we have to prepare a bit differently because the thrust is a lot on features and the side stories and the news breaks which you get off the field, as it were. So yes, there's a lot of preparation which goes into a cricket tour. Uh, Especially where I am concerned. I mean, you said 2-3 days preparation. Yes, that is on tour. Uh, but my preparation starts 15 days before I take the flight out. And background is very important in all this. You've got to read a lot. You've got to remember. You've got to be lucky to remember stuff. Like if you're going to Australia, you've got to remember a story which may have happened 10 years ago, but you can revive that story in a way by meeting that personality, that main character of the story, and that's how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, more than reading, I mean, you did mention 15 days of reading, but I think more than that, it's also a passion to have followed cricket for a certain number of years. And, maybe it was something that you read when you were a teenager, but on tour, suddenly that thing comes to light and you realize that, maybe there is a story in there as well, right? It's also an inbuilt passion that adds to your process of journalism.
Very correct. But as a journalist, I've prepared for a story years ago. Actually, I'll give you an example. I was at the Mini World Cup in Dhaka in 1998, and I was at the press center. And while I was waiting for my copy to go off, those days we used the fax machine. I saw Sunil Gavaskar talking to a journalist in England, from England, and the journalist was asking Gavaskar whether he could participate in a benefit match for Winston Davis, the former West Indies fast bowler, and I couldn't help overhearing their conversation because I was that close, and I think Gavaskar said yes, we should do whatever we can for him, and I then recollected that Winston Davis met with an accident. A tree branch fell on him and got him paralyzed. So I thought then, way back in 1998, that when I go to England, I must go and visit Winston Davis. I went to England in 2002 and then in 2007, and for some reason, I couldn't do this story. But I was determined to do this story on my next tour, that was 2011. So this was possible only in between the second and third test match. That means in between Trent Bridge and Edgbaston. So when we reached Northampton for a tour game, which was before the third test match, I decided to meet Winston Davis because he was close by. Close by, I mean, not exactly close by. It pinched me about 200 pounds to travel there. So Debashish Datta, my friend and fellow journalist, and me made the trip there to Beauty in Worcester, and we met Winston Davis. And just to prove the point that you can plan stories for years and still not be able to do it, but at the same time you can ultimately do it.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about that 2002 and 2007. Was it that you had contacted him and there was some logistical issue, or you just didn't have the time amid your other schedule, or what was the reason?
See, in 2002, I just went for the NatWest Trophy series, that famous Mohammad Kaif and Yuvraj Singh tournament. And I stayed on for the Lord's Test match. just because I just wanted to cover a test match at Lord's. It was not a part of my tour program, but I stayed on my own cost. And then I made I went for the full test series in 2007. You were on that tour, I remember.
Yeah,
But
we
we
were
did
there
not
together.
play. Yeah, we did not play at Birmingham. So there was no chance to meet Winston Davis.
Okay. Yeah, they played a one-dayer at Birmingham, but by then I think you had left. Yeah.
Yes. So I was there only for the test series. So I somehow I couldn't do that story. But in 2011, I ensured I met him. And there's an interesting story behind this story. I always wanted to do the story before the Birmingham test match and not during the Birmingham test match. Why? Because when the Birmingham test started, journalists would get wind of the story and would make the trip there, which was closer. Whereas I made the trip from Northampton, which was it was a fair bit to travel. And the Indian team were practicing for their tour game at Northampton. And while they were practicing in the indoor nets, I made inquiries for Winston Davis's number. A chap at the net area was quite helpful, but the only problem was that he shouted out at someone, saying that, look, Stephen, for example, this guy is from India. He wants Winston Davis's number. And this was right in between the group of journalists. And I said, oh God, what has this man done? He's been helpful, but at the same time, he's been so unhelpful.
He has
But
let out the
anyway,
story.
yeah. Anyway, I was lucky. No one caught on. And I went to Winston Davis's house the next day with Debashish Datta. And it was an experience of a lifetime because all your life you've seen Winston Davis running in, bowling quick, active on the field guy. And there you see a paralyzed man. It was heartbreaking.
Yeah, I'll definitely link that piece. It is a very touching piece, and of course, it has photos as well. And having seen, seen if you go to YouTube and see highlights of Winston Davis, the player and the bowler, and then if you read this piece, you would understand what Clayton is talking about: the disparity in the image and the person who we recall. How difficult was it to talk to him? Because there are parts in that piece when I remember where he was also quite, it seemed like he was emotional. I'm not sure, but how was it?
Oh, well, he was very good. In fact, he agreed willingly to meet me. And he was quite good. I think Debashish Datta got a bit emotional. Debashish Datta promised me that, he would be strong. But sadly, at the end of the interview, while we were saying goodbye to Winston, Debashish Datta broke down. And that was another memorable part of that meeting. And Debu was very sad that, he had let me down. And he always told me I'll be strong. Because he knew Winston Davis, actually. I did not know Winston Davis. I had only seen him in action. Whereas Debashish Datta knew Winston Davis from his... from Davis's trips here to India in 83, 84 and in 88. So it was harder for Debu to accept, seeing this man paralyzed. But what struck out was, Winston Davis was so positive, despite everything what life threw at him. That was the unforgettable part of the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are things that when you read the interview, you imagine what would have gone into the making of it, but it's only when you tell us this that it actually, we understand the entire story. So wonderful. But one point though, which I want to bring up is that throughout this story and also throughout whatever else you've told us before, it's obvious that one must have a grasp of the history of the game, because if you don't know Winston Davis, then there is absolutely no way that this story would even cross your mind.
Yeah.
So
I've been I've been lucky. I've got a great desire to learn things about the history of the game. So I've been rather lucky in my self promotion or self development. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I get what you mean. So, okay. So now that you have told us this, one story, we'd love to hear more.
I'll take you back a very long way, way back in 1991. I was a freelancer then for Midday. I remember I doing only statistics at that point of time. And Sharda Ugra, the famous journalist, was part of the Midday sports team. And one evening I came to hand over some statistics. And I also had an interest in local cricket. So I told Sharda, Sharda, do you know this Mohsin Khan, this Pakistani cricketer who's married the Indian actress Reena Roy? So she said, yes. What happened? So I said, Mohsin Khan is going to play Kanga League. And it was a conversation where I was just informing her. I was not looking at a story per se. And Sharda got up and said, oh, that's a scoop. And, in those early days, Sid, I did not know what was a scoop. I had only seen the word scoop in a Cine Blitz magazine, and which I really did not understand. What is a scoop? So then I came to know what is a scoop. And then Sharda said, do a story and please speak to him. So in those early days, I didn't even know what she meant by speak to him. What she was trying to say is interview him or semi-interview him. So then I got what she wanted, and then I did not even know what to ask Mohsin Khan. First of all, I had to get his number. So when I got his number, then I asked Sharda, what do you mean by speak to him? So she explained to me that, I mean interview him. So that was my first scoop, actually. I'm not a great scoopsman, let's be honest. But that was my not big scoop, that was my big local scoop. That Mohsin Khan playing Kanga League in Bombay.
So no other. I mean, it seems quite remarkable now, but that nobody else knew about this and nobody else was pursuing this.
Yeah, somehow no one knew about it. I was surprised because I would have thought that Pradeep Vijaykar from the Times of India would have known because he was a Car Gymkhana member. But I think I was the only guy who got this. And then, of course, Midday, headed by Nikhil Lakshman, he wanted more on the story. And I remember the day before Kanga League started, he sent a photographer to Mohsin Khan's home and got a mock picture of him practicing in his backyard with a Protos bat, I remember, saying that, Mohsin all set for Kanga League. And it was the same season where Rohan Gavaskar made his A division debut. And I remember Nikhil, I think I filed something on that, Rohan, to make his A division debut for CCI. And Nikhil sending out a photographer to Rohan's home in Worli and shooting him at Worli Seaface. So those were great days for journalism.
Well, I mean, Sharda.
I mean, all this has gone out of fashion, but I think it still works.
No, I mean, Sharda herself was on this podcast, as you know, and she told us about, her early experiences and calling Imran Khan and getting an interview as when she was in college. But the fact that there was a Pakistani cricketer playing club cricket in Bombay, and that was just passed so many people by. That itself seems so remarkable now.
Yes.
But it's a great recollection, Clayton. Thank you. And so let us go from 91 to the next one, about the next story that you have picked.
I've picked an interview with Michael Holding. Again, this was before the Mini World Cup in 1998. It was my second tour for Midday, foreign tour. And I landed in Dhaka only to find out that there's a strike and you can't get out of the airport till about 2-3 o'clock. The opposition had called for a strike. And I was with a few journalists, and there was Sunil Vaidya, who used to work for the Gulf News, an Indian journalist. He's finished with Gulf News now and he's in India back. And I remember Sunil Vaidya, great journalist and a journalist with a lot of influence. So Sunil was among us stuck at the Dhaka airport, and he calls up Asif Iqbal, who was involved with the organization of this mini World Cup. Now they call it Champions Trophy. And he told Asif Iqbal that, look, there are a lot of journalists here. You have to make some arrangements for them. And we were put in a VIP room, about 5-6 of us. And since we had arrived in the morning, a lot of us were sleepy and things like that. And I remember a few guys from Bombay who were there but went off to sleep. Meanwhile, Michael Holding walks in. He arrives from Karachi, where he was commentating for the Australia-Pakistan test matches. And I had never actually conversed with Michael Holding, although I took a few quotes of him when he was here in India in 94-95 during the Bombay test match. And I approached Michael Holding while some of us were sleeping. And luckily he agreed for an interview. And he gave me a very fine interview where he said that, Brian Lara, he thought was taking things for granted. And that's how his performance had dropped. In 98, if you notice, Lara had not scored the kind of runs he was capable of. And he gave me a fine interview. And the others woke up when we had already finished and Michael Holding was ready to leave the airport. So that was another satisfying moment.
You basically got the story while the rest of them were sleeping.
You can say that, yes.
So what was their reaction? Were they like disappointed or what?
A friend of mine also from Bombay was, he felt that I had tricked him and I should have woken him up, but it all goes. That's the business of journalism.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I guess in the professional sense, you were just doing your job, right? I mean, you want the exclusive. And where did this interview happen? Did it happen?
This happened at the VIP lounge while Michael Holding was waiting for the strike to end.
So when the interview was happening, was a part of you also wondering whether somebody's going to wake up and then also?
That fear was there at the back of my mind, but luckily they were tired enough to sleep off.
Yeah. I mean, listeners should know that that's the other thing that journalists often have to deal with is that, it's not only about getting the story themselves, it's also about others not getting the story. So these are the little games that happen. Okay, wonderful.
But as I speak about this mini World Cup and, me being thrilled to get a Michael Holding interview, I must say that I was lazy in not getting a Malcolm Marshall interview. I should have tried to get Malcolm Marshall because he was coach of the team. And hearing stories on how good a man Malcolm Marshall was, I think I would have got that interview. It's one of my regrets in life because Malcolm Marshall passed away in 99 and I never interviewed him.
Oh, and he was in Dhaka in 98 as a coach?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. Wow. Yeah.
I saw him at the lobby, at the team hotel lobby. And for some reason, I don't know, maybe I was scared to approach him. I don't know. I took the easier option and, approached Dennis Wade, the long-serving physio of the West Indies team, who also gave me a good interview, no doubt. But not interviewing Malcolm Marshall is one of my regrets.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, just another, I think less than a year later, right? He just passed away. He passed away.
Yeah. The Dhaka tournament was, I think, in October, November. And he passed away in 99. During the India-New Zealand game at Rajkot, ODI.
Okay. Wow. Very, very interesting. Yeah, so...
That was a knockout tournament, right? I mean, the Dhaka one. Yeah. Okay.
Not a knockout, no. I think India went out of the tournament after... Oh, yes. Maybe, yes.
In fact,
you're right.
India went out after losing to West Indies.
West Indies, yes. Yeah.
Semi-final, yeah.
They had a good win against Australia and then they failed against the West Indies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my namesake was in the West Indies team, Clayton Lambert, I remember.
Oh, the legend.
Yeah.
He went on to play for USA after that.
Yes, he did, yes.
Wow. Yeah, Clayton. Talking about Clayton, it is. Is he the only international cricketer with the name Clayton, or has there been others?
I don't remember anyone. You may be in a better position to tell me.
No, I don't. I haven't. I think at least since I have been following, he would probably be.
I know there was a cricket writer called Clayton Goodwin.
Oh, okay.
Who wrote a book on West Indies cricket and cricketers.
Okay. I bring this up because in 2007 in England, when we both of us were fortunate to interview Mike Brearley, one of the things that he was very intrigued about was your name, Clayton Murzello. I mean, more than Clayton, it was Murzello, and he wanted to find out where that came from.
Yeah, and he couldn't understand when I was saying I'm an East Indian.
He was quite because puzzled. He thought you were from there. That would be you would be from Guyana or something.
Yes. I remember that at the
Oval. Yeah, he was thrown off by that. Correct.
Yeah, it's better that because there were some who just couldn't get my name. In fact, Professor Shetty, the former CEO of the BCCI and the secretary of MCA, he never tires telling a story of how one day he was in his cabin at the MCA and the peon Vani came and told him that Clinton is on the line. And for a moment, Professor Shetty believed who is President Clinton calling, and go to see it was me. Yeah,
that would have been something. Clinton calling.
Yeah, and the lovable J.Y. Lele used to always call me Kitten.
Okay.
Yeah.
The J.Y. Lele of the 3-0 fame.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, you also wrote a book with J.Y. Lele, right? Or about J.Y. Lele?
No, I did not write a book. He wrote a book separately. I did not write his book.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
But he wrote a fine book. I mean, it's not the best book going around in literary terms, but it was a fine book. It tells you a lot about the happenings within the BCCI and, Lele being Lele, always forthright. It's a book you must have.
Yeah, if I can find a e-version, I'll definitely link it and hopefully our listeners can pick it up.
One thing good about J.Y. Lele, he was always available for a quote, for a confirmation, and also for a denial. At one time, he was called Jaiwan Denial Lele.
J.D. Lele, okay.
Yeah, but he was always available for, and always spoke his mind. I remember a fast bowler coming out from a Sri Lanka tour and telling the media that he was injured, and J.Y. Lele thought he was not injured. And he said, "What are you talking about? He's lying." So he was not afraid of, players, revolting and stuff like that. He was his own man.
And also
and a very good administrator. Sorry, Siddharth.
No. Please tell us about his administration.
Yeah, he was a very efficient administrator too.
Okay. No, I was saying even the quote that made him famous, I think there was a little bit of meaning lost in translation there. I think he said it will not surprise him if India lose 3-0, or am I wrong?
I really don't know what he told the journalists. But I can tell you that Lele spoke what he felt. And he may have felt that, India would lose 0-3.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, either way, I think, if he said India will lose 0-3, then of course he should be commended because they did.
Yeah.
And if he said, I think India will lose 0-3, then also he should be commended. So the fact that it became a big deal was because it was before the tour. And
yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, so wonderful. I mean, I think that 1998 tournament, quite a few people have spoken about it. We got the Bangladesh correspondent for ESPN Cricket for Mohammad Isam. He was, of course, a young man then, and he watched the games from the stands. But even though it was a short tournament, and even though it went by quickly, people have so many memories of it. So wonderful to have.
Yeah, it was a good tournament. And it also helped world cricket financially.
Yes.
Because apparently Dalmia decided that, that the ICC should never fall short. I think one of the reasons this tournament started was because J.Y. Lele told me the story. One day he gets a call from Dalmia saying that, he wanted the BCCI to give their affiliation fees earlier than normal when it was not due. So J.Y. Lele said that, yeah, fine, I'll manage that. But why do you want it? He said, because there's no money to pay salaries at the ICC. And he also told Lele that I'll be making this request only once. Never again will I request the boards to submit their affiliation money in advance. And that's how he started the Champions Trophy.
Wow.
So it was a big money spinner for the ICC.
Wow. And I guess he lived up to his promise. He would have never needed to ask them again.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. So, yeah. And also the only time South Africa have won a international one-day tournament. So again.
Yeah. Coached by Bob Woolman, a fine man.
Hmm.
I remember, if you allow me to, just blabber on.
Yeah, we allow you anything. Don't worry.
I remember meeting Bob Woolmer the day after they won. And it was a nice interview and stuff like that. But he told me something which I will never forget. In fact, I have pulled out the clipping just to get it right. And I asked him about, about his future as South Africa coach. And he said, yeah, but I won't be there for long because, the players have to hear a different voice. Players should not tire hearing the same voice all over again, every day. They should hear different voices. And that's one of the reasons why I also want to move out.
Interesting. But he didn't. He stayed on till, I think, after that, right?
He stayed on a while, but not very long.
Okay. I think 99, he was definitely there.
Yes,
because that famous Sansi Cronier, earpiece. So maybe a little after that. Maybe after the semi-final, for all I know. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I'll quote him here. He said, I have a view that players should not listen to the same voice. It is always good for a team to have new ideas. I shall miss those practice sessions, but I shall not miss those critics.
All right. So, let's move on to the next one you have shortlisted in your list of stories, behind stories.
Yeah, you're making me out to be a hero. Please don't do that.
Hero? What hero? No, I mean you are a hero for people, not in the sense of a soldier or something, but for cricket, people in cricket they look up to you. So sure.
Thank you. The next story I thought I should talk about is meeting Jean Chappell. Amazing lady, unique lady. Had 3 sons who played for Australia and had a father who captained Australia. Why I wanted to meet Jean Chappell is again because of my reading habit. I had read in a Pakistani magazine. I also used to collect Pakistani magazines, which I used to pay double and triple the cover price. And I used to buy them from a place in Mumbai called Chor Bazaar, near Chor Bazaar, basically.
Okay.
And there was one bookshop there, Naz bookshop, which used to sell Pakistani magazines. So I used to go all the way and buy sometimes.
So this was like the
issues.
Cricketer and things.
It was called The Cricketer and it was edited by Hanif Mohammed, the great Hanif Mohammed.
Was this the magazine where Farishte Ghati worked?
Maybe.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I used to buy some issues from this Naz book stall. On Muhammad Ali Road. Sorry, I got the road. It's called Muhammad Ali Road. And I had read in one of the issues an interview of Hanif's mother, who also, like Jean, had test cricketers as sons. And I thought to myself, who would be the other mother who would be interesting to meet someday? And then I thought of Jean Chappell. So we land in Adelaide after the Brisbane Test match of the 2003-4 series. And again, my touring companion Debashish Datta was also keen to meet her. So we approached Ian Chappell. And he said, yes, in fact, you could meet my mother at a dinner which we are having tonight. I remember it was a Saturday. No, it was not. It was a Friday. And the Chappell family were in Adelaide because of the opening of the Vic Richardson gates, the Chappell gates.
Okay.
There's already the Vic Richardson gate, the Chappell gates.
Okay.
And the full Chappell family along with their wives were in town. And Ian said that after play today, that means Friday, we are going out for dinner, and you could meet my mother there and fix it up. And I'll put in a word. That was very nice of him.
So this was the famous Rahul Dravid double 100 test, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So after play, after our press conferences, we got late. And Ian said we'd only be there for 1.5 hours because the dinner would last for that long only. So we had to reach at a particular time, I remember. So after our press conferences, we realized we are late, but still we have to go and meet this lady to fix up an interview or interview her there. Actually, I think the plan was to interview her there, but things turned out that, we had to interview her the next day. So we come down, try and get a cab to take us to this restaurant, which was about some 10-15 minutes away from the ground, and we couldn't get a cab. And we realized that, we are done. I mean, we've missed our opportunity because there's no way now we can get a cab and reach before the family leaves. While we thought that, there was a guy, I think he was a carpenter at the Adelaide Oval, and he looked friendly. So we asked him, would you drop us to this restaurant? I think it was a Thai restaurant. He said, okay, I cannot drop you right till the restaurant, but I'll drop you somewhere. So while we sat in the car and we started talking cricket, and the guy realized that, we had a problem on hand, and he dropped us right up to the door of the restaurant, right in time for the dinner to end. So there we were, made our way through, and Ian got up and said, okay, now I'll introduce you to my mother. And we spoke to her. And she asked us to come to her retirement home the following day. And while we were happy to do that, it meant that we were going to miss out on the action. And it so happened the next day that Dravid and Lakshman got hundreds.
Okay.
And we missed a bit of that, a large portion of that. Because we had to set out in the morning. It was right at the end of Hindley Street. Again, took a cab, spent a lot of money, met her. Amazing interview, amazing person. And then it was time to go back to the cricket. But before that, we had to go to a department store to get our role developed. Because you can't carry the story without pictures. So I had to get my role developed at the department stores, go back to the ground and then file the copy, get the picture scanned. I mean, yes, those days we had email, but it was very difficult in terms of pictures. And about our interview, Debu got the most out of her. He also asked her about the family's relationship with Bradman. But she was a very smart lady. And when Debu asked her, how would you rate Bradman as a human being? All she said was, Lady Jessie was a good person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So very smart lady. She gave us a lot of insights into the family, how, she was very upset when this underarm incident took place and everyone started blaming Trevor. She also was not happy with people blaming Greg. And Ian also added to it by writing a critical piece on Greg. In the Sun, I think the Sydney Sun. And she gave us an insight into her sons on how, Ian is like butter. People think Ian is a very tough guy, but actually Greg is the tougher one. And Trevor is always the sweet one.
Wow. Yeah, so that underarm incident must have been some moment for her. You have two sons involved in the action and one son writing the criticism on the paper.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, Ian always says that, Greg was not talking to him after that piece for a while. So he broke the ice at a next session while he came for a game in Sydney. And then when Greg, indicated quite clearly that he did not like what he wrote, he said, you don't understand something. That one chapel ordered the underarm, one chapel bowled the underarm. And if the other chapel agreed with it, they'd think that we are all mad. So look at it this way, Greg.
Yeah, famous quote. Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, it's so classic Ian Chappell, right? I mean, this is the exact kind of thing that
typical
you can
Ian,
expect. expect him to say. Yeah. Wow. Just the clinching argument.
And Sid, the other part of this interview, I was amazed that Ian asked for the copy before it was sent. Not to check it. He did not want to check what I wrote, but he was just so curious on what I was writing about his mother. And I remember giving him a printout. And printouts are not easy in those days where press centers only had one computer and no printer. You had to get some prints from some office or something. And I remember giving him the print, and he was so happy that I met his mother. In fact, I should have been grateful to him because he gave us the introduction. And even Greg was very happy that we went to interview his mother.
But what did you feel about missing the play? I mean, as somebody who was covering for a broadsheet, there was no way you could have done that. So in a way, it was a huge advantage for you that you could miss almost an entire chunk of play and yet get a fabulous story outside.
Yes, that was the good part of the newspaper, because that is still good part of the newspaper, because we are encouraged to do stories and not bother about missing action. Of course, you should have a basic idea of what happens on the field. But at that point of time, during that tour, I also had the advantage of having my boss on tour, which was Khalid Ansari. And he also was very encouraging in terms of side stories and stuff like that, although being old school.
Yeah, so there was one person from the paper at the game anyway, so that gave you an advantage to move around. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that I think is a huge thing. I mean, if you have two people covering, then one person can look out for the side stories. And of course, I don't blame you at all for missing the action and doing this story, because how many chances would you get to meet this remarkable lady?
Correct, exactly. That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And it's interesting to me when when you told me about Ian Chappell's and Greg Chappell's reactions. Does it mean that she had not been interviewed much by the Australian press itself, or she was very elusive, or how was she?
I don't know what was. I don't know, but I read a lot of Australian stuff because I used to subscribe to a lot of Australian magazines and things like that. But I don't remember reading a piece on Gene Chappell. I remember reading a piece on the family, his father and stuff like that. But specifically Gene Chappell, I don't remember a piece.
Oh, wow. That's
And also I got a nice picture of all of them together, so. Good fun to do.
All the brothers
with the mother at the restaurant on the Friday of the test.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then again, I shot some pictures at their residence. Of course, the story was carried, but it did not get huge space, and I can understand that being a Sunday. But fond memories of that visit.
And approximately how old would she have been then?
She was 83 then, nearly 83.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have definitely read a story about the war's mother. And I remember, some Australian paper had carried it. But this is very interesting that Gene Chappell was so, it was difficult to meet her. And I guess, obviously, because everyone would have wanted to interview the family and things like that.
Yeah. And her contribution to cricket has been so much, actually. For example, Jeff Thompson was made a member of the Hall of Fame about 2 years ago. And he ended his speech very emotionally, where he speaks about, people who are never seen in the newspapers, who never get any coverage. But the people who drive the cricketers to their grounds, wash their clothes. This is what exactly Gene Chappell did. So it was great to, recognize such a lady.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. Great to hear. I mean, I'll obviously link all these pieces in the notes, and you all should read the pieces. But now that you have an idea of the background, I think it makes it even more enriching. And these are the kind of things that you normally read in a journalist's memoirs. So I'm just giving Clayton a bit of a nudge here. And, these are things that would make such great reading. Clayton, you should get on that project very soon and bring out those memoirs.
Yeah, inshallah, it will happen.
All right. So let's move on to the next one.
Yes. Another thing, you reminded me of this story. I had completely forgotten about this story. I had met I was covering the 2004 India-Australia Test match. And I remember the last day was washed out. The Test match was drawn.
Yeah.
In Madras. And I think I went on that day to meet the family of this former cricketer called Kota Ramaswamy. Now, Kota Ramaswamy played a few Test matches for India. His death was quite uncertain because he just left home one day in 1985 and never returned. He was 89 then. And I remember Wisden had a big problem because Wisden used to have a section called Births and Deaths of Cricketers. And they did not know what to do with Kota Ramaswamy because his death was unknown. It's presumably that he died at that point of time. Of course, there's no way that he's living, but there's no actual record of his death. He just left home and never returned. So I decided, I read about this, and they say in Hindi, the kida in me made me do this story. They're very keen, going to Madras, let's find out how his family feels that he just left home and never returned. So I went to his family and I spoke to his son. Son was very forthcoming. Gave me a lot of info on his dad. His dad was quite a personality because apart from, being a test cricketer, he also was manager of the Indian team to the West Indies in 52-53. He played two test matches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying he also played Davis Cup.
Yes, he was double international. Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember they're staying in the Adyar area of Chennai.
So it's interesting that you both the previous story and this, you seem to have this familial angle as well going on, because it's not just who is playing, but it's also the people who are around them. And somebody like Kota Ramaswamy,
yes.
How difficult was it to for them to get them to open up about him, because I'm sure it was quite a devastating moment. I mean, here's this person who's gone.
Firstly, I remember being very difficult to get a contact for them. On tour, sometimes you can get nowhere with a story. But then sometimes, brightness emerges and you get some contact who knows one person, the other person knows some relative of the family. And that's how I think I got a contact with his son. And I remember going to their house, and his son was also involved with SPIC, the SPIC bowling scheme, which had Gary Sobers as coach for one season. And I remember his son telling me that Gary Sobers was the guy who always wanted to go out somewhere in the evening. He could never sit at home because he was Gary Sobers' host in Chennai. And even at that age, Gary Sobers wanted to go partying and he wanted to dance. He loved dancing and things like that. So he also gave me an insight into Gary Sobers' personality.
Interesting. And Kota Ramaswamy's dad was the famous Bucci Babu. After
Bucci
whom
Babu. The Bucci Babu tournament is named after. Yes.
Yeah. So very illustrious family.
Yeah. Sadly, these things are forgotten by our cricket fraternity. I mean, I don't think the associations also do much for their former cricketers in perpetuating their memory and things like that. That's something which Indian cricket should learn from their other boards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is such a sad story, and I remember you telling me about it actually a little later after you had returned from Chennai, and of course I read it. But then you told me this, and I mean, I still feel extremely bad about this man who towards the end of his life just disappeared. And he's international cricketer to boot.
Yeah. And I remember Wisden I say this again, Wisden had a problem because all they said was death unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a regular reader of that birth and death section of Wisden somehow.
Yeah, they still have
probably
it.
that gave me an idea. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether they have this section now.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm not too sure, but maybe wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know about the. Until I think, yeah. But this is something that again, the history comes into play, because if you have not read it, then these things just pass you by. You don't even know who this person is.
Yes.
So, yeah, wonderful, Kota Ramaswamy. Yeah, so we'll again keep in mind. I mean, I think there are a couple of more articles on him. So what I'll do is I'll link your pieces, of course, and then after that I'll link some related pieces related to that as well. Perfect.
Thank you.
So is there anything else that you had shortlisted? I think there were one more, right? Yeah, or two more. Yeah.
Don't remember what. Would you remember something which you want me to talk about?
No, I think you had mentioned about how, as a journalist, it sometimes becomes difficult to get quotes. Was it Ranatunga? I think, you had mentioned a Ranatunga incident.
Yeah, oh yes. On my first tour to Sri Lanka. Since Midday was a proper afternoon paper then, and I have spoken about how challenging it is to work for an afternoon newspaper. Of course, I must say that there are advantages also. Now, there are two things which stood out on that tour for me, apart from, India beating Sri Lanka, a rare win actually. And, that win in Sri Lanka was great in 1998 because they flogged us in the recent past then. And we did very well to win that tournament. But apart from the cricket, two things which stood out for me was, I was the only journalist who was after quotes at the end of the day. The other journalists did not need any quotes because, by the time the match got over, they had a crunch time sending their reports. And their newspapers could only fit in the report and no quotes. In fact, three things which I remember from that tour, if you allow me to expand on. One is when a game, India-Sri Lanka game at Premadasa got washed out, and there was some problem about the Duckworth-Lewis rule then, and it was a no-result game, and India could have won that game if the rain had come maybe two balls later or something like that. And somehow something told me that the Indian camp would not have been very happy about this. So I thought of doing a story. Sadly, at about 11:45 at night, because I had all the time in the world for my edition.
Because your deadline was at 5 a.m. or something.
Yes. So, no, actually, I think India was saved by the rain rule. But I still felt that, I should ask the captain of India, Mohammad Azharuddin, what he felt about it. And I decided to knock his door at about 11:45 at night.
Oh.
I remember I was staying at the team hotel, so his room was just opposite mine. And I knew that he wouldn't be sleeping because by the time the team comes, has their, their dinner and things like that, it would be quite a while before they hit the bed. And I suspected that Azhar would have still been awake. I conjured up some courage and I knocked at his door. And he came out with a towel round his waist. He said, "Yeah, what do you want? What do you want?" So I said, "No, I mean, we missed this rain rule came into play, and this rain rule is really warped, and I wanted your opinion on it." So I remember him saying that, but there's nothing we can do. The authorities have fixed this rule. So, but what I remember is him knocking his door at 11:45 at night for a story, and all credit to him. He took it very well.
Wow. Okay.
But those were the days where you could knock the door of the Indian captain. I mean, how good or bad that was is for you to judge.
Yeah, well, I mean, he, I guess, trusted you enough to know that you're not there for some mischief or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And another thing I remember, two things I remember also, apart from this, is I remember being the only journalist, I said, who was after quotes at the end of the day. Because we had to file a quote-based copy.
So for press conferences and things,
there was Sid. There was no such thing as a press conference on, at least on that tour.
Okay.
There was no such thing as post-match press conferences or even pre-match press conferences. And most of the games were held in Premadasa, I think. And this Premadasa, to get to the players' dressing room, at Premadasa, you've got to walk about 25 to 27 steps. It's quite high from ground level. I didn't mind the walk. I was lighter than I am now. But the thing was that the intense security force didn't allow you to go up. And Sri Lanka being what it is, the security is very tight at grounds.
Yeah.
And I was having a big problem because I couldn't catch any of the skippers, Azharuddin and Ranatunga for courts or the man of the match or whatever. So I was having a problem, and I mentioned this to Arjuna. And not that I knew him too well. It was my first tour abroad. And he was very nice. He said, if you're having such a problem and if you're staying at the hotel, why don't you come to the hotel and give me a call from your room over the intercom and I'll speak to you. And I think I did that a couple of times, and that's how I got my coach.
So,
it was very nice of it.
So this was like at the end of games, you would just call him and he would tell you about, you could ask him anything. And he would
a couple, not all games, but I remember doing it a couple of times. Yeah, and he would speak to me, yes.
That is so sweet of him. I mean, and so understanding as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also remember him because he gave me the first interview of my tour. The morning I landed with some help with Pradeep Mandani, who was my room partner for that tour. He agreed to be interviewed by the poolside. I just landed in Colombo and he gave me this interview. So ever grateful to him. And also ever grateful to Anshuman Gaikwad, the coach of the Indian team. I remember after the final, there was a party. And Tendulkar and Ganguly had scored 100. And there was a nice party. The hotel had hosted a party. And again, wanted some courts. So Anshuman said, and quite rightly said, I know I'm busy with the celebration. I won't be able to leave now. So I'll talk to you later. So I said, I'm on a deadline, but I can wait for the courts. So he said, don't worry, I'll give it to you. So I went back to the business center, keying in my copy. I think I'd almost finished for the day and only a few quotes left from Anshu. And guess what? In the dead of the night, Anshuman Gaikwad enters the business center of the hotel and says, okay, ask me whatever you want now. I'm here for you. And I don't think you'll get those days again.
When do you think, in your experience, I mean, not exactly, but what were the inflection point where this changed? Because of course now you won't have anything remotely like this, but and
not to blame the establishment for that. I mean, those were different days.
But do you think that with the TV, the number of TV channels that came in and also the number of newspapers that came in post 2001, things probably took that turn?
So that had a role to play because they just couldn't manage with so much of media. You had to. But look at the good side of it, Sid. There were organized press conferences, pre-match press conferences, post-match press conferences, organized after that. Before that, there was hardly any pre-match or post-match talk. I mean, the players could talk to you, but there was no organized press conference. So I see that as a positive. All these journalists, including me, I don't cover too much now, but all these journalists, they know that at the end of the day, someone will talk to you, which is a positive, which is a good thing. Although I would not, I would not forget the days where I used to be the only journalist waiting outside the dressing room. I never entered the dressing room as a matter of policy, and nor would I have been allowed to enter the dressing room. But I was always waiting outside dressing room doors for my courts. But now there's a press conference, so that's the difference, if you can imagine that.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and more organized for sure. And
yes,
and now of course these days you have. Social media and everything else. So things can be much more streamlined.
But Clayton, I'm curious
that
I'm curious that you were the only person outside doors. Like, shouldn't there also been like journalists who are doing the same thing? I mean, absent of any like organized press conference, I mean,
Yes.
then that would have been the norm, right? Like a lot of people would have been clamoring the players for quotes.
No,
Curious
not
that
exactly.
didn't happen.
Yeah, no, you have a point, and it's good that you asked me. But you should remember that we were an afternoon paper those days, and there was no way that the morning paper guy would be interested in quotes because he was working on a deadline, a tight deadline. In fact, their job is more difficult, I would say, because they have a deadline to catch. Also, I have a deadline, but I have a deadline maybe 5 hours later after that.
Right.
So they're probably right. I mean, there was no need for them to gather any quotes.
Right.
So, talking about the shift, though, I mean, do you see that now? I mean, a journalist today working for whatever newspaper, do you see? I mean, apart from Midday, because I think Midday is pretty much following the similar template, right? Like
Yes.
non-offbeat stories and not
Yes.
necessarily mainstream. But do you think that other outlets now are have more of an opportunity to do such stories because or are they still pretty much in the mainstream doing the match
No, I
report?
think they do a lot of offbeat stories nowadays, and all credit to all the journalists. I think the amount of side stories have increased, and that's what newspapers have realized also, that Midday realized it earlier, but the newspapers have realized that there's a certain amount of interest surrounding those kind of stories. So I think everyone does their fair bit of offbeat stories, which is good.
Yeah, especially because now every thing I mean, earlier also you could see on TV, but now the extent to which you can see the action and the
Yes.
replays and the highlights and everything, and you can even go and see the whole every ball replay the very next day. So I think
Yeah.
these offbeat stories are the ones that people are waiting for.
Yeah, you've got to be very practical in this scenario, because I always say that let's not take ourselves too seriously. The guy, the average fan is not really waiting to get up in the morning to read what you write in your match report. I don't think that's happening. The guy, the fan wants to read what happens besides the match. If he has missed the match report, he can always log on to the web and find out what happened. And I don't think that we've got a lot of Neville Cardises and a lot of Jack Fingertons around that people are just waiting to read match copies. We don't have it, so it's fine. I see many people, pointing to the fact that, we don't get to read a good match copy. But let's be practical about this.
So, but at the same time, don't you think that the reason we don't have, I mean, of course, forget Cardis and Fingleton, they were a different level, but the reason we don't have people writing good, interesting, illuminating match reports is also because of people saying that nobody's interested in that.
Yeah, but again, I'm coming to the point of being practical. I mean, if you send a reporter, I'm talking about on tour, if you send one reporter on tour, you can't expect him to come up with a glowing match report and also satisfy the need of having a feature or a side story. It's not practical. It's not possible to do.
Okay. So you have to pick, and you pick your strengths.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, a lot of newspapers also have former cricketers writing. Don't miss their logo and stuff like that. No grudge there. But I think if you want, an in-depth analysis, I think you should go and read their stuff. I don't know whether they're giving you that. That's a different issue. But if you want a more analytical view, I think that comes in the form of columnists.
Former players, correct.
Yeah.
So,
But there are many who will disagree with, which I'm fine with. I mean, you can always have another opinion.
I think it's also pretty clear in terms of outlets, right? You have certain, pub, you know, newspapers and certain websites that are known for their mainstream coverage, and certain that are known for the offbeat coverage. And
Yes, and you
people
go to
pick and
those
choose.
respective departments. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about is, with this with social media today, is
Yeah.
there like a temptation almost to, like, not only like when you find a story, not only write it as a story but also make it into like a social media nugget, so that that then picks up many hits and clicks and things like that.
Yeah. There are many ways to do it. I mean, you can just pick out something which is in your piece and play it up on Twitter, and point to the full story and things. There are a lot of things to do, and smart operators will do it, which is fine. It's a good new world to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. And if
And let's face it, everyone wants to be on social media. It's an accepted sphere.
Yeah, I asked this because just yesterday I got this forward from my mom, who has absolutely no interest in cricket. My mom and aunt,
Yeah.
actually. My aunt sent it, but my mom also read it. About that famous story about, David Frith and the 1983 World Cup, and how he gave India no chance. And then, of
Yes.
course, India won, and then he ate his hat.
Yes.
And he made a show of
And
eating
also
his hat.
published it in his magazine.
And also published
The
that
picture
photo
of him
in his,
eating it. Yeah.
eating it in the magazine and all that. So that came as a nugget. And it struck
Yes.
me that my mom and aunt, who probably, who on a daily basis don't care about cricket, they are sharing these stories and reading them. And I'm like, wow, I mean, it's the new world out there. It's a new audience.
And it's amazing how people lap up nostalgia. It's really amazing.
Oh, only now? Are you saying during this whole pandemic, or even generally?
More during the pandemic, I've been noticing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think now with no cricket, everyone is now looking back.
And also our sense of what is normal has taken a heavy beating, whether we like it or not. So
That's so true, Ashoka.
Yeah, so I pretty much think we've covered good ground, and whatever I wanted to ask, I've covered it. Ashoka, you have anything else?
Just one slight curiosity right at the beginning when you said Mohsin Khan played for the Kanga League. Just before that, you just mentioned that you are collecting statistics. How did that work during the print age? Like this was the early 90s, right? Like the internet has not pilfered into India, but therefore, how did statistic collection and statistic presentation work back then? Sorry.
Well, India always had very good statisticians. And there was BB Mama, there was Anandji Dosa, there is still Sudhir Vaidya, although I don't think he compiles stuff any longer because he's got on age. We always had very good statisticians, and the newspapers also gave a lot of prominence to statistics. And watching that, I'll tell you my story, because I first got something published in Midday in 1988 when Tendulkar's team lost the final, Giant Shield final, to St. Mary's. I mean, it's a final which is not much publicized. Sharda Sham lost that final. And that's how I wrote a piece in Midday. That's my first contribution in Midday. And after that, I did not know basically what to do, although I was following a bit of local cricket. So I tried my hand at cricket statistics. And I am no statistician, but I used to compile statistics before every test match or after every series, averages and stuff like that, just to get a foothold in the paper. And then I started, actually covering local tournaments. And then, I'll always be grateful to cricket statistics because that gave me a foothold in the newspaper as a freelancer. So it is a combination of statistics and covering local cricket. If you go back to the Mohsin Khan story, I was at the office because I was going to submit a statistical piece. And I also had this conversation with Sharda because I followed local cricket.
Right, because that kind of thing right now in papers, I don't think, is that still a practice? Because it's very rare to see a statistical piece on cricket or any sport as a column
Yeah,
or
that's come down to the minimum because nowadays people go to avenues like Cricinfo for their feed on statistics. Although in midday we take something called a figure trigger, where we give a figure and we explain the story behind that figure. So we carry some bit of it, but no, you don't get series averages and track records before every test match and things like that. Yeah, that we don't see in newspapers anymore.
Because I would assume that would be a great context before a series, right? Like that would be almost a great talking point, like absent of quotes and player access. Like you can set a context very easily with numbers.
Yeah, it's gone. I think it's gone out of fashion.
But one thing, Clayton, maybe I should also ask you, and even our listeners may be curious. The players who play for India, we all know that the access to them is pretty limited, and it's very hard to get one-on-one time with them.
Hard and impossible.
Hard and impossible. But I want to know, but for these kind of stories that we have been talking about, former cricketers or relatives of cricketers, or these cricketers who are not keeping too well. But I'm imagining that access is still the same, right? People will still talk.
Yeah, that's not changed.
Yeah, so
you mean to say that you see less of those stories, is it?
No. What I mean to say is, I mean to say, yes, I do see less of those stories. But what I mean to say is, I would imagine that with the access to the main players being cut off, unlike earlier, I would imagine these other stories and these offbeat stories and these other things are become much, much more popular because, they're much easier to get.
Yeah, there's a gold mine. It's a question of just exploiting it. It's a question of doing a good research, exploiting it, having the right contacts, having that, that little patience which you require for every story. I think these things can be done and they still work. But, opinions differ.
Absolutely. And I think, these are the kind of stories that even somebody who is, perhaps like a youngster listening to this podcast, who is interested in getting into journalism and who wants to do, this is something that even they can do. And then they can pitch it to a newspaper. And if it's a good story, a newspaper like yours will be more than happy to carry it, right?
Surely.
Yeah, so here's a call out for anyone listening. If you have any offbeat stories, offbeat ideas, just go ahead and do it. And either you can publish it online yourself because there are so many ways to do it, or you can approach a newspaper. Yeah, wonderful. So on that note, I think, this has been great to know about these stories and to learn about, Winston Davis, Kota Ramaswamy, Gene Chappell, and all these other lovely tales that you have told us. Thank you for your time, Clayton, again.
Most welcome. Pleasure.
Yes, and please take care of yourself in these times. And this has been a great supplement to the previous podcast. So, if those who haven't listened to the previous one, I'll link it so you can listen to both and you'll get a complete picture of what I was at least meaning to discuss. So thank you again, Clayton.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ashoka.
You and Ashoka.
Yes, thank you.
Clayton. Yeah.
And before I forget, also, I will link Clayton's Twitter handle and all these pieces. So please follow him on Twitter as well. And he puts out everything that his paper does, and it'll be great for you to follow his work.
Thank you. Follow Midday. Thank you.
Won the test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wild.